if you're an athlete and you're playing some pro sport and you don't run as fast as you should because your hip feels a little funny and you miss the ball, it's kind of a bummer, but it's really not that big a deal. If you are a tactical athlete and you're not able to run as fast as you need to, and you can't get to somebody in time when it really matters and when it's life and death, those are the instances where I don't want you to feel like your body is not able to perform the way that you want it to. And that's part of the training of the military, and what they do a great job at is, how do you push through when your body won't let you? Because your body can do incredible things. But then also, how do you deal with that afterwards?
Welcome to the Movement Driven Podcast with Dr. Greg Goldberger, where we help you bridge the gap between pain and performance. Each week, we'll share strategies, insights, and real-life applications to help you keep moving and stay driven. Now, let's get into this week's episode of the Movement Driven Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Movement Driven Podcast. I'm Dara Sweat, and I'm here with Dr. Greg and our special guest, Elza Van Niekerk. Elza, welcome to the show.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. How's everybody doing today?
Doing well.
Great.
How are you doing, Dara?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm so excited to have Elza on with us today because I know that the topic we're going to talk about today is something she is super, super passionate about. So I just can't wait for all of y'all to just listen to her extreme knowledge and passion about this subject. I know that we're going to be in for a treat. So today we are going to be talking about the people who protect and serve our communities, but they often neglect their own recovery and movement health. Who do you think I'm talking about?
Wow. That could be a few different things, but yeah, definitely people that put their bodies through so much and they give so much to everybody around them. We just really want to make sure that we take care of our service members and our military, firefighter, first responders, everybody that's out there doing things for everybody else and taking care of all of us. We just want to make sure that we can take care of them as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
That kind of what I would summarize that as is the kind of the topic of today is tactical athlete, and like, what is a tactical athlete? And so when we refer to that, we're talking about our military personnel, our first responders, our police, our firefighters, people that are literally putting their bodies on the line, their lives on the line. And what can we do better in our profession to make sure that we're keeping them as healthy as they can be, since they're already doing so much for us? And so my first question, if I just jump in there, Dara, what kind of made you first interested in this? I know this is a true passion of yours. We talked about it the very first time we met. And this is like your career aspirations are to really work with the military and first responders on a really big level. And so just tell the people listening, like, where that passion comes from and why you love that so much.
So first off, I say this with all the love and respect in my heart for all athletes out there. However, when I went to PT school, I never thought that I was interested in sports physical therapy, which is so funny because that is like the majority of what we do now, and I absolutely love it. But I just thought, there's so many people out there that want to do sports physical therapy and they want to work with athletes, and there's such a competitive market for that. But what about everybody else? What about the people that need that same level of care as professional athletes that don't get it? And what's the market like for that, and how competitive is that? And then I realized, there's actually a really big need in that, to have that same knowledge, that same level of like top athletic performance treatment and preventative and rehabilitation care, that really needs to get put into that market. And then I got really lucky to get exposed to that quite early in my career. The clinic that I worked in before had, we weren't a TRICARE clinic specifically, but we had an aquatic therapy department. And we live in Jacksonville. Jacksonville's a huge Navy town. We've got like 3 Navy bases nearby.
Right.
So they have a really interesting protocol where if you get some sort of injury, you go to physical therapy on base. Then after that, you go to pain management on base. Then you go to physical therapy again. and then you might get cycled through that a few times. But if you've tried a few different things, including pain management and surgery, and you've still failed all of that, and you're still having trouble recovering and getting back to your level of performance that they need you to do, then at our base specifically, they sent them for aquatic therapy as kind of a last resort and a catch-all, which meant that, unfortunately, I saw service members at the very end of their med board process, and they usually been injured for years at that point. They've been going to physical therapy for years. And that's a really weird limbo for them to be in, because sometimes they're on limited duty. Sometimes they're completely pulled out of their job. Sometimes, especially if they're at the end of their med work process and they're about to be basically, discharged from the military, it means a lot. It means that they're losing their job, but it also means that they're losing their security for their family. It means that they're losing their housing. It means that they're losing their insurance. And that is all so directly tied to the benefits that service members get. But that's the risk, that if you lose it, you lose all of it. And so my heart just really went out to them. And I saw a lot of people that had injuries that were pretty severe. But the more I talked to them, the more I was like, man, I wish somebody caught this like 3 years ago. I wish somebody caught this right as you were getting into boot camp, like maybe right as you were getting into your first duty station, and just took a look at your body and was like, hey, you do that thing kind of weird. Maybe let's check that out. And nobody did that.
And so, like, when you say nobody caught this, is that a procedural inefficiency in kind of the systems of our military? Is that something? I know you've talked about how each branch does their own thing, but like, what have you experienced? Like, what's the problem where nobody's catching it? And then what can we as therapists outside of that do? Like, how can we help that?
Some of it is a game of numbers, and some of it is in the way that the military works. I mean, if you're recruiting and you're looking at how many people can we recruit, and how many of those recruits can we get through boot camp, and how many of those can we get through to their first duty station, it's inevitable that you're going to lose some people. But the problem is that if you were to try to screen people preventatively before they even join, I don't know that many people would make it. So I don't know that that's the solution. I don't know that you can be like, hey, let's get the perfect bodies, right? We're not trying to get the perfect bodies. We're just trying to get bodies, but then we're trying to turn them into perfect bodies in a very short period of time. And the military does a great job at that. I mean, if you take a civilian and by the end of a boot camp or a basic training cycle, they're a soldier or an airman or a Marine, I mean, that's pretty crazy to think about. That,
of course,
they have a system and it works.
When you're going to assume the body's going to break down in that time, just from, just as a layperson or things that you've seen or heard about in movies, even, the point of basic training is in boot camp is to break them down, to build them back up, from what I understand. And so there's a psychological part of that, but there's also a physical part of that.
Right.
And we've seen like where, like we add too much load too quickly, the body breaks down, right? We know that from just our patients, right? We talk to patients that, hey, you've gained 20 pounds over the last 3 years. That's going to have a big impact on your knee pain or your low back pain. So can you speak to that about like the beginning stages, if we're staying in this military realm, like when they first get in the military, you talk about there's nobody really catching these small inefficiencies of movement. And then they're just go right into like, hey, go run, go march, go weight yourself with, you tell me how much weight. What does that do to the body,
Right. Well, the goal is that the body adapts, that the tissue adaptation happens during boot camp. But you're not sleeping. You are eating pretty well. You're really getting fed a lot of food, but you're not really sleeping. So your conditions for recovery are not optimal. Plus stress. And it's done that way on purpose, because really, if somebody's going to break under the load of boot camp immediately, will they really be able to do their job in the military?
And do you want them on the front line, sort of thing?
Right. And I think there's a fine line there, because there are really good candidates that sometimes don't make it through because of freak accidents during boot camp. But there's some people that just might need a little bit of extra time. I think the problem that I've heard most recently is that we're recruiting from the general population, and the general population is not always quite accurate because if you look at some of the reasons why people might join the military, it might be because of financial incentive or because they want to go to college or they just want to try to get away from home.
Right.
And so they might have things going on already just because of the fact that they're already stressed out. They're already trying to get their life together and do something good, but they're just not there yet because they're so young. So we're pulling from the general population. And I think, back in like the 60s and 70s when we were drafting people used to be way more fit. I mean, people used to run and bike and walk everywhere. And now that's just not something that we do. So the general level of fitness is a lot lower than we've ever seen it before. Right. And then that's the population that needs to suddenly be loaded up. And that's hard.
And so we're still training similar to how we did a few decades ago, but we're coming in at a lower baseline level and they're having to adjust for that. But I'm sure the military doesn't want to adjust standards too much because then that's a domino effect for sure. So what do you see as like the common injuries early on in boot camp that kind of linger and travel with people over time? And how can we as movement driven set ourselves up, and how do we set ourselves up to help these types of people once they do come through our doors?
Right. Well, first off, there is a really interesting conversation that's happening in the military right now. They're doing some incredible things at the unit level, but also at boot camp where and through the different branches. I know they're all called different things, but where they really are trying to adapt how quickly they load people. They're trying to give you like a graded introduction to load instead of just throwing you into the fire pits. And I think they're doing a good job of it. But what I hear some of the people tell me is, they might have had something where they stepped on a tree root or they fell in a hole during a run. And they were able to get back up and they finished the run and they still had like a little bit of a lingering tweak that lasted through boot camp, and they were able to push through and they were able to make it. But their foot got a little jammed and their foot never really gets unjammed. Or, especially if we look at women, one of the biggest problems is if they're loading their backs really heavily and then they're rucking, we see quite a lot of hip injuries, and hip fractures specifically. And that I just think has to do with
like small neck type stuff. Like stress fractures?
That's the interesting part. I don't know that anybody has a very good idea of exactly where the hip fractures. Sometimes it's in the pelvis, sometimes it's in the femoral neck. But it'd be interesting to see like what the like most common, second most common, third most common fracture points are. Because I think that could give you a really idea of exactly where the mechanics are going.
Well, I was going to even say like different weight distribution of their backpacks and how it loads into the body could affect that. That's something if it was happening in the same area for most.
Right. And I mean,
the pelvis too. That's
right. And I mean, they teach you how to pack your bag the right way so that you're loading the weight evenly. But that weight's going to sit on a different place on a woman than it is on exam because the pack relative to their spine, and they measure you for the packs as well.
But women, we know like women naturally hold more body weight below versus a man holds it more up top.
Right.
And that's going to drastically change how it's loading down through the pelvis essentially.
And that's where later.
Right.
So because their hips are wider,
now it's going straight through. Yeah, there's a different. Now we're nerding out too much. I don't know how much the audience is caring about this anymore. Oh, so Dan, do you want to get us back on track? But yeah, that's super interesting to you and I. Now, so I think what you're getting at is they have a minor injury, but it's not enough to necessarily, hey, I need to go get this looked at or treated, or the military has too many other things going on, too many other things they're focused on to get these guys and gals trained up the right way. And then by the time they're years into it, or they're even out of the military for a few years now, they're still dealing with these same issues. And then that's when we kind of are getting them for the most part. Our goal is to get them as sooner as movement driven. It's one of our missions over the next couple of years is to really work preventatively with the military. But right now when they come in, what can we do to help them at this time? When you see them, what are the main things? Like, are you looking at active duty military or first responders? What is your assessment look different? How does your assessment look different than other athletes? what is different about the way that you treat these individuals? Can you go into that a little bit for us?
What I really love about what we do here is that we look at the body holistically. Where it's not a script, it's not a body part, it's not an individualized item, because that's not how the body works. You can't just work on certain muscles and not on the whole chain in which they reside. You can't work on just one joint and not look at the joints around it. And I think most physical therapists would look at the joints above and below, but we really look at the whole body. How does your pelvic stability affect your shoulder mechanics? How does your, split activation affect everything up the chain? How does your core affect everything down the chain? So what I really love here is that if somebody comes in with any injury, my question is always, okay, where is it injured? Exactly which structure is affected, but why is that structure taking more load than anything else? Is it working too hard or not hard enough? And whatever the answer is, it means that something else is not working efficiently. That's why that load is unevenly distributed.
Right.
So we're not just trying to help the injured tissue adapt. We're trying to help the injured tissue adapt and the load to be distributed more evenly so the injured tissue doesn't keep getting the same strain over and over again.
Right.
So, yeah.
And then when a military or when, an active duty military or police officer, are you doing anything different versus a different type of athlete in your assessment? Like, are there different things that you're looking at to mimic what they need to do on the job? And how are you keeping that in mind during the rehab process?
Right. Well, it definitely depends on what their job is and what they have to get back to.
So you're delving into that first visit. That's part of your assessment is like, okay, I need to know exactly what positions you need to get into, right, how much you need to load into those positions, how long you need to be in those positions. And that's going to be drastically different than general population that we do it.
And what gear are you wearing while naked into those positions? Because depending on what type of gear you have on your body, either during like your day-to-day basis, but especially if you're out in the field and you have to go perform, then it's going to change how your body moves. And sometimes you can see, like, it's funny. I always tell people you can see from the way that people walk what they do. You can see Navy members walk with their feet a little wider. They'll look like they have sea legs. They cover you a little bit of a waddle because they have to. Yeah,
that's interesting.
If somebody carries a weapon, especially on their hip or on a thigh holster, they might be used to standing ready. So they'll always have one hip slightly forward compared to the other. And then especially from there, if they have weight on their thigh, then they swing that leg a little bit harder than they swing the other leg because they're so used to compensating for the weight that they normally have on their thigh. And that can stick with them for years. I mean, I've seen people that come in decades after they haven't done work like that, and you can still see it in the way that
they live. Well, and then there's a decrease in trunk rotation very gate too. What you have
absolutely
just for a police officer when you have a belt full of thing, and then we haven't even talked about firefighters, the amount of gear that they have to take, and while carrying other human bodies that are lifeless a lot of the time, obviously, like it's a tremendous load. And I think you mentioned this earlier on, and I thought of something while you were talking. You mentioned something to the effect of like the professional athletes, we respect them, we cheer for them, we love them, nothing against them, but they are super blessed and get the best care in the world. They have the best doctors, they have the best rehab staffs. And then the military, not to speak ill of the rehab staff or the doctors in the military, but it seems like they get the short end of the stick, right? Like it seems like, we always say these people deserve more money. They deserve more financial compensation. Well, they deserve more and better medical care. So I have a big passion for this as well, being, son of a police officer, grandson of military vets and stuff. And so we love working with our vets and our first responders. We give discounts to all of them. We want them to come see us because we want to take care of them. But talk a little bit more. We kind of talk a little bit about your passion for it. What's your specific background? Like, I know you've had more experience than the average therapist working with this population. You've attended conferences. Can you tell us a little bit about some of that stuff that you have like a super big passion for?
Yeah, I got really lucky. I got invited to a wonderful conference. A big shout out to the NSDA's TSAC, Tactical Strength and Conditioning Conference. I started going a few years ago, and even though I'm not one of the official workers with the military yet in that capacity, I'm not a government contractor. I don't work for active duty in a direct capacity, but we see so many patients like that in our clinic. Right. I just keep going back to the conference because I learn so much every time that I'm there, and it's such an incredible group of people. I think when I started looking at this problem, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a system-wide problem. This is something that clearly it's not something that just one person can change. And talking to everybody around me, it felt like they were like, oh yeah, the system's broken. There's just nothing we can do. That's just kind of the way it goes. And then I went to this conference and they were like, no, wait, we're all trying to work on the system together. A lot of the people there too have been in the space for 15, 20 years when it wasn't really a thing. And they had to be the pioneers. Yeah. And they had to break through that and build that path forward. And they had to work so hard to build that path that they're like, oh my gosh, there's more people that can help us. Please come help us. So they're just so happy to share their knowledge. It's been lovely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wait for Derek.
Are you guys ready for me to jump in now? Just been letting y'all take it away. I mean, a lot of the things that I had on my questions that I wanted to discuss with Elza, you guys have been covering so seamlessly and beautifully. So I think it's been a great conversation so far. But a couple of just questions to kind of bring it back to, the analysis and, kind of what we do here at Movement Driven. Just kind of a lot of we kind of mentioned how the tactical professionals, whether that's military or, police or firefighters, they don't seek the care until something is really wrong. You guys kind of touched on that a little bit about, how they come in young and, they're fit and they're flexible and everything's great, but they're not really doing anything between, their first initial enlistment or when they sign up and they graduate from firefighter or the police academy, to get into work. And the next thing 20 years later, they can barely stand up, get out of a chair, walk around, kind of having these issues. So on the preventative side, because that's what we're about here at Movement Driven is preventative care and injury prevention. What are some things that the men and women in these professions can do from the get-go and then just during their years in the industry or, in enlistment, to make sure that in 20 years, 30 years, that they can still move around. You're not like you're 18 years old, but, you can still move around efficiently. And there's minimal pain, if any pain at all. What kind of advice and what do we do here at Movement to help ensure that those people can feel good and, move well?
So one of the things that I try to teach all of my patients is first things first, whatever pain you're having right now, I want to see if we can help you manage that pain as well as possible. And that you have all the tools that you can to manage it with as little medication as possible. But then my next point that I want to work on is how can we prevent you from having that flare up to begin with? And what are some strategies that you can use to make sure that your joint's moving the right way and it's not pinching every time that you move, or you're able to take care of your soft tissue so there aren't points that are pulling harder than others and that you can distribute that load a little bit more evenly. And then the last part is how can we get you to move as efficiently as possible so you never even get to the point of loading the joint so much that it starts to pinch. So I think just having that knowledge, having the extra tools in their tool belt to be able to address those things before they happen. And then the hard part is seeing how they can fit it into their daily lives and turn that into a routine. And I think that is very hard when you're just starting out. You might not necessarily have the resources to get the information that you need. You might not have the time to get the information that you need. And even if you know all the things, do you really have time to put it to use in your first few months or your first few years? And the answer is always, there's always something that you can do, but how can we make that more readily available, and how can we help turn that into something that turns into a culture,
Right. Exactly.
Not only help people recover better, but have that be part of their norm.
For sure. So I know that you've worked with a couple of Coast Guard, what is the word?
Posties?
Coast people. I know that you've worked with a few.
Coast Guard service members.
Thank you. Okay. So that's awesome, Elza. I know that you've worked before with a few Coast Guard service members and firefighters and police officers. Obviously without sharing personal information, can you share an example or a story where doing some proactive PT with them made a difference? And they've come to you and said, wow, I'm moving this better. I'm moving that way better, or anything like that?
Yes. So I just recently I had somebody come in that's part of the police force, and he was saying that some of the work that he does is voluntary, and so their gear is very different than the regular police force because they're getting the old gear. And the old gear, everything was loaded on their belt, but now they're trying to see if they can make sure that they distribute the weight from their belt to their chest, so that it's loaded a little bit more evenly. So the new stuff is distributing the weight.
And over the shoulders?
It's like on their chest.
Interesting.
I don't know if chest plates is the right word. On their like vests, they have tools that they can attach to that instead of putting everything on their belt. So we were talking about how, in an ideal scenario, he'd be working on moving a certain way, but if his weight is sort of unevenly distributed, how can he compensate for that during, or maybe not compensate for it? We're always trying to see how can you compensate as little as possible, but maybe compensate where you do have to. So how can he build the necessary strength and like anti-rotational strength to make up for the fact that he has more weight on one side than on the other? And so we were just talking about building up like pelvic stability, building up shoulder stability, making sure that his core is taking that load as efficiently as possible, and that his core, especially through the diagonal patterns, is as strong as it needs to be to make up for the weight that he has on his body. So that is a complicated answer, but really he's learning how to utilize his central body as efficiently as possible. Another instance is I had a patient who came in and they were already a phenomenal athlete. I mean, they were top of their class and top of their athleticism, and they were just doing such a great job. But they just wanted to know how to make sure that they got ahead of any little injuries. And I just ran him through, the basics of joint mechanics, the basics of soft tissue adaptation, and then making sure that he was moving efficiently. But he was pretty good at moving. So I just taught him like, hey, if your joint feels a little pinchy, here's how you can work on that while you're at home and in the gym. But here's also how you can work on that while you're in the field and you might not have as many tools.
So that sounds like it was a relatively easy fix where these little things can go a really long way. And that's what I try to impart on people. It's like, listen, we're going to go through this process. We're going to get you better. And then once you're better, you need to hold on to the handful of things that really made a big difference. Not all the exercises are going to be game changers. They all have their place in the rehab process, but some are going to be game changers. And if you had gingivitis and you stopped flossing and you got gingivitis again, guess what? That's on you. You shouldn't have stopped flossing. So I tell it to my patients, if you have an exercise that makes you better and you stop doing that exercise and then your pain comes back, that's on you. All we're trying to impart on people is keep doing the things that work. And sometimes those things, like you were just saying, can be a relatively minor thing because you're already doing so many good things. So many of our patients come to us and they have pretty well-rounded programs.
Right.
And that makes our job tougher because now we have to find out what's the one little thing that you're not doing right or moving well in. And we have to put, our x-ray vision on, so to speak. And that's what makes our job fun from my standpoint. But I think people don't understand that they're walking around with pain all day. And sometimes it's like so easy of a fix sometimes, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's super complicated, like your first instance where we have to do anti-rotation loading cross it, like stuff that our audience is like, wait, what? But we're just like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. All that. I had another thing that I thought of, and it kind of goes back to the assessment part of like when they go into the military and they have blanket assessments, if any movement assessment at all. Really, it's just a blanket physical, like, are you going to die or not in the next, 8 weeks of boot camp, I would imagine is what it is. Correct me when I say something that's incorrect, Elza. But I had a patient, she's a vet. She's been out of the military, I think since 2009. She's actually a new eval we have this week. And I won't obviously mention names, but she has minor scoliosis that they noted when she got into the military. And during basic training, both her knees swelled up. And they literally told her it was because of her scoliosis. And I was listening to this, and I don't know if you're rolling your eyes as much as I was, because I was like, oh, that's just like, maybe. I mean, I'm not going to say it didn't, but like the likelihood that both your knees swelled up when you were in basic training because of your lifelong minor scoliosis sounds crazy to me. And she agrees. Well, what was that?
I would expect one of them.
That's what I said.
Yeah.
And then after our assessment, she told me this at the beginning of our evaluation. After our assessment, I realized she had a very large lordotic curvature.
Right.
And that's in more of the plane where you can expect more of a symmetry side to side impact. If we have tight hip flexors, tight rectus femoris, leading to increased patella joint compression, that's a much more plausible thing. But I just say all this, not to put anybody down. And this patient thought it was BS since she was in the military 20 years ago. And I just gave her credit for knowing that instinctually she was right all along. But it's such a lack of a process of really making sure that we're doing the preventative thing. So I say all of that to say to anybody listening, anybody in the Jacksonville and St. John's community that is a first responder, that is a firefighter, a police officer, a military vet who's had issues that you think are related to your workplace function and duties, we have the ability and the expertise and the history of showing that we can take care of you in ways that unfortunately haven't been taken care of in the past. So for all of those listening, I'll say, we love to take care of you guys. We get discounts all year round to our first responders and our military personnel. So if you can't find the answers in, whether it's at the VA or wherever it is, if you can't find the answers you're looking for, Elza is your girl. She's going to hook it up. Best hands in Jacksonville. She's going to cook up the manual therapy, the dry needling, the movement patterns. She's better at assessing gait than anybody I've ever seen. I learn from her every time I hear her talk about gait patterns. And so all of these things go into how can we actually do our job, easy, relative, simple fixes that are going to get you feeling better immediately and for years to come, and keep you doing the job that you love and then keep you doing the hobbies outside of it too. So that's all I got to say.
Yeah, for sure. I wanted to kind of pivot really quickly before we begin to wrap up, just because outside of the first responder military programs that Elza loves and is passionate about, there's also that workplace wellness program that kind of goes hand in hand, because this is a workplace, right? It's maybe not a sit at a desk and, clock in 9 to 5 with your briefcase in an office type of workplace, but it is a workplace. So what are some ways that departments or organizations within the military, just in general with workplace wellness, can have a better support for their teams physically on both sides of the spectrum? Because I know that that's something else that you're really passionate about. And that doesn't mean we're going to have another 35, 40 minutes going on this podcast episode. But I know that Elza is really passionate about this, and that kind of ties in. So I really did want to make sure we talked about that.
Thank you. Yeah. So one of the things, one of the events that I was very fortunate to be invited to was a symposium at Fort Moore, where they were talking about their H2F program, their holistic health and fitness program that the Army has. And they were just trying to make sure that their units understood what resources were available to them and that they were able to use it, but they also used it as a showcase to other units nearby, how they were running their H2F program and how much success they'd found in it so far, and that they were sort of laying down the blueprints of what this program is all about, and just trying to make sure that information is as widespread as possible. So let me give a little background on the H2F program. The Holistic Health and Fitness Program is implementing a human performance team, and their goal is to have it at the head of every brigade And the human performance team consists of a number of people in the active duty side and on the civilian side that work together. It's physical therapists, occupational therapists, mental health. They're looking at your sleep nutrition as well, your sleep health as well. And then they're also looking at your spiritual health. And I thought that was really, really interesting that they're trying to make sure that these 5 pillars of wellness are all being addressed at a unit level and at a preventative level to make sure that they're creating well-rounded people who can be as resilient as possible so that by the time that something happens and they need to have that intrinsic resilience, that it's already there.
Those 5 pillars are in place.
That those 5 pillars are in place.
It's interesting, those 5 that they chose.
Yeah, it is. Physical, sleep, nutrition, mental health, spiritual.
And then what you take from that, you're implementing with all of your clients, because you're huge on the workplace wellness, whether it's a tactical athlete or not. Like, you're taking that back to that same, like, that's the way your brain works, I think, is you're always in prevention mode. You're always really good at looking at the task at hand, or what the patient's task at hand needs to be at work or in any aspect of life, and replicate it out with your exercise and with your evaluation process. So yeah, like, for those of you that in the community we're looking for workplace wellness services, if you have a company and you're looking to make sure that your employees have the right lifting mechanics or ergonomics and things set up the right way and those pillars in place, right? Maybe we won't touch on the spiritual because we're not expertise in that, but the ones that we can help set in place, like, that's what we're about to. So if you have any interest in our workplace wellness programs, please reach out. Elza heads up that program as well. So she'd be happy to hop on a discovery call and talk about how she can help you and your company, for sure.
Right. And I think it's interesting that if you look at the workplace wellness programs that work really well, they have a few different components. First off, they have resources that are readily available to their employees. They're trying to really help their employees live as balanced a life as possible so that they are not stressed at work, so that they can perform as well as possible. And then they usually have, some of them do, some of them don't, but some of them have some form of like pre-hire screening and post-hire screening to make sure that the person who is being hired for the job is capable of doing the job in a way that won't injure them. And that's not something that I see that's very widespread. And it's interesting to me that, if you're getting hired to work in a warehouse where you have to lift things over your head X number of times a day, that there's functional capacity testing and like work hardening testing that makes sure that you have the upper body strength and the mechanics that you're using are correct, that you can lift something overhead without injuring yourself up to, safe limits and safe load over any given time. But that's not something that the military does. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier, is you can't really do that before they get put into boot camp.
Right.
But that's definitely something that at a unit level you can address, because that's what we always say is ergonomics in the workplace has a lot less to do with like, oh, are you lifting with your legs and not your back? It has a lot more to do with how is your individual body moving? When I say brace your core, are you actually bracing your entire core, or are you only bracing your abs? When I say lift with your legs, not your back, but you feel it in your back anyway, do you have any idea how to correct that? Because I think some people are just like, oh, well, this is just the way that I move. It's normal. It's like, no, wait.
Right.
We can work on that. Right. And having that balanced approach and that individualized approach is such a key for workplace wellness, but it's such a key for the military. And that's the thing I think they're still having a really hard time with is, obviously the military is huge, certain branches significantly more so than others, but how do you give that individualized breakdown of movement mechanics to every person? And it is very hard to do, but it's something that you can learn as a group, like maybe a smaller group, and then implement it and then teach other people. So, or
in the meantime, if you're listening, you got to own up and do it for yourself, apparently, like everything else in this world. So come and see us and and we'll get you moving, and then we'll work on the entire military over the next few years.
Right. That's always the hard part. It doesn't matter where you are. Nobody's going to care about your body as much as you do.
Right.
Nobody has any incentive to take care of your body other than you. So just having those tools available can help you from a life of pain. I just don't want to have people come in and be like, oh, my knees have been hurting for decades to the point where I can't play with my kids. It's like, well,
right. And it would have been so much easier for us to help you decades ago. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think that speaks to a larger point of I think a lot of people don't realize what we are capable of doing for them in a relatively short amount of time. You know, people that have been in pain for years can get out of pain in weeks, and that's a really big deal.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, not something that happened in a short number of weeks, but I've been thinking about another case this whole time, and I just want to mention it as well. The physical demands are the things that we've been talking about so far, but I think the mental demands are very important to touch on. If you're an athlete and you're playing some pro sport and you don't run as fast as you should because your hip feels a little funny and you miss the ball, it's kind of a bummer, but it's really not that big a deal. If you are a tactical athlete and you're not able to run as fast as you need to, and you can't get to somebody in time when it really matters and when it's life and death, those are the instances where I don't want you to feel like your body is not able to perform the way that you want it to. And that's part of the training of the military, and what they do a great job at is, how do you push through when your body won't let you?
Your mind won't let you.
Your mind won't let you, right? Because your body can do incredible things. But then also, how do you deal with that afterwards? I had one patient, it was actually somebody that was really close to me. They had been overseas. They'd had a very significant incident, a very traumatic incident. And during the process, they took a few rounds to their chest, but they had chest plates on. And they also injured other things, and they tweaked their back, and they got thrown across a whole distance, and they landed really hard. Anyway, so there was a whole bunch of injury, but they specifically had pain in their upper back when they came back. And when I started working on them, I was like, oh my gosh, their chest feels like a rock. Like it is entirely and completely locked up. And for him, what he was feeling is that when I started working on him, first, he started reliving what happened to him. And second, what he kept feeling was that if he let go of that tension, the chest plate saved his life. The chest plate that made his chest tighten up and made his ribs hurt saved his life. So if he lets go of that, then he doesn't feel like he's safe anymore. And that is complicated. That is really right. That's really something that you have to take into consideration as well. If you're treating somebody and you're like, hey, why won't their muscles relax? Well, like, but are you really working on why their muscles are tight to begin with? And you just have to take that into consideration if you're working with service members, and depending on what their job is and what their experiences have been.
I see that with a lay person that doesn't necessarily have what you would think to be those traumatic stories. I mean, you never want to judge, but I've had countless patients in my career in the middle of our first minute therapy session, and we're talking and just break down, start,
yeah.
And you can see it, and you know, you see it in these women, and a lot of the time more than men, or, you know, obviously, but
well, they break down in different ways.
Yeah, right. They're not, the men aren't shining. The men start talking about some completely, they start diverting, and I have to break, like, let's talk about it.
Right.
The women, you can see them holding back tears.
Yeah.
And the second I say, let it out. It's okay. Like I say, trust me, we can have a psychotherapy session as much as we can have a physical therapy session. And then it floods.
Right.
And then it's cathartic, right. I think, for most of them. But it's a necessary part, but people don't realize how much they're holding on to physically, emotionally tied together. And then you add in the trauma that comes with military and first responders and PTSD and all the stuff that you and I can't even begin to empathize with.
And the support when they come back home.
Or the lack thereof.
Right. Or just that people just don't understand.
Well, yeah, you can't have empathy. Like you can have sympathy, but you can't
really know what it was
right. And then all the other people are, and all the people that can't empathize are broken too. And it's, anyway.
There's some great groups though. There's I hope one of the groups that we work with, Top Tier Fitness, they have a group for military veterans.
Yeah.
They meet on Wednesdays. They have a little Bible study, and they just all talk, and they're good people. So fantastic. Yeah, so there are great groups out there. You just have to find them.
Yeah, local and obviously, more national and federal groups. I'm sure that they're out there. But the local groups that are run by the local people in your community, that's probably where most people need to spend their time, in my opinion. But yeah, Derek, do we have we covered a lot here. Do we have anything else we want to touch on before we run?
No, you guys did a great job. I was just here to moderate and make sure sound levels are good. So Greg, you did my job for me today. Yeah. No, but thank you guys so much. This was an amazing conversation. I'm sure we will have plenty other episodes where we continue the conversation on this, possibly even getting some first responders, military men and women as guests as well. I think it would be really great to have a first person witness or testimony to what they're going through and how we can help them. So at Movement Driven here, we want to help everybody. We want to make sure that everybody's moving pain-free, injury-free, and just, living their best life, and being able to, pick up kids and grandkids and so on and so forth. Whether you're in the military or not, we want to help you here at Movement Driven. And also if you're listening and you've got a team, whether that's you're leading a team for your business, or you lead a team at a corporation, something that we are passionate about is workplace wellness. And we would love to talk to you about partnering with you to see how we can help your employees or your staff move better and stay driven. So Elza, Greg, thank you so much for this episode today, and we'll see you guys next time.
See you guys.
Sarah, thank you so much for making sure that our message gets heard. We appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for tuning in to the Movement Driven podcast with Dr. Greg Goldberger. Want to see how we're helping people in Jacksonville bridge the gap between pain and performance? Head on over to movementdriven.com. Until next time, keep moving, stay driven.